Good evening everyone and welcome to another video. So I realised something, we haven't really talked that much about the Eternal Alchemy. Yes, we did a big video on it when the patch came out, but there's a lot more in the story and the lore that has been going on in the community that's come to my attention I haven't really addressed on the channel. So today, with it in mind that tomorrow is patch day, I wanted to do a little bit of a retrospective, but mostly a food for thought video. There's not going to be like some big theory at the end here, just a bunch of things I think are interesting and conclusions I've come to. In particular, let's start off with the Eternal Alchemy and generally where I sit with it now. In the previous video, I talked for probably too little on the idea that Morgemoth and Zaitan's orbs have been swapped, because this is now the thing I've pretty much come to the conclusion is the case with the cutscene. I mentioned for the one window of a second, I said maybe the whole cutscene is a double bluff. I really think that that is the case here. I think that what ArenaNet did was they gave us this cutscene and they knew that the layperson would take from it, oh look, this represents Morgemoth waking up. Look, everything fills up with green and you hear a dragon's roar. And we're going to be fighting a new dragon. But when you look closer, I think they deliberately did it so that instead people who did look closer would realize, this doesn't add up. Maybe this is telling us something else. And what I think it's telling us is that this is symbolizing not Morgemoth's awakening, but Zaitan's defeat. Now, one thing straight away that has been confirmed even in-game, these orbs definitely at least represent the Elder Dragons. I've had a couple of people coming at me and saying, oh, you know, these can't represent realms, these can't represent gods. They confirmed it's the Elder Dragons. Yes, that's true, they are the Elder Dragons. But as I mentioned in the previous video, the idea is each of these entities surrounding the central entity, they can represent more than one thing. You know, a dragon is just a facet of many other things, as we've heard before. So, I do think that a discussion into whether these are other realms, whether these can be gods as well, is still valid. I'll talk about that more in a second. But just so that everyone's on the same page, maybe you're a bit hazy about it because it was a while ago since we did the video. Here's the idea, alright? All the orbs are there. They do represent Elder Dragons. You can read this in your personal story log after you've completed the current events of the living world. It says, I saw an image of the Eternal Alchemy in which the Elder Dragons were being represented by orbs, or something like that, okay? Now, as you see these orbs, at first they're all in fixed locations around the big center one, the 7th orb. Now, they start to move. Each one lights up and in turns begins to spiral around the central area. They do it in a very specific order, an order we've already heard before, the order of the Elder Dragons rising. So you see the red orb moves first. What did we know the first Elder Dragon to wake up was? Primordus, so that one's moving first. Then we see them all move in turn, and the theory seems to fit until we get to the very end. However, you can make the theory still fit if the green orb, which crashes into the middle and we assumed was Morgemoth, the green being, you know, representative of nature and overgrowth, is instead Zaitan, and this green sort of represents his poisonous, noxious ways. And when this orb crashes into the middle, we are not seeing the rise of Morgemoth, that Morgemoth has now taken control of Tyria, now everything's going green with overgrowth. Instead, we're seeing that essence of magic, that purity of what makes Zaitan who he is, all this magic he has consumed, crashing into Tyria, into the ley lines, and flooding the world with extra magic. This knocks the system off balance and causes the other Elder Dragons to react. Now, one thing I find very interesting about this orb, this Zaitan orb, is it starts black, then when it starts moving, it ends up going green. When it crashes into the middle, everything splashes out green too. Now, you could say, yes, this is just because of poison and miasma, but having just played the personal story again, I find it curious that the way we killed Zaitan was using a huge gun, okay? Now, how do you kill an Elder Dragon? The personal story did not go into this well enough. We may as well just accept the fact that the personal story was bad, for deep lore, for connecting to characters, to all sorts of things. But the story about how we killed Zaitan was we shot him with magic he wants to consume, but the magic we shot him with was corrupted and poisoned in some way, and so when he feasted on this magic, it turned against him, weakened him, and eventually killed him. Well, what does that mean for what we've now learned? What does that mean for what we just saw in the Eternal Alchemy cutscene? Maybe we see everything splash and explode green when he sort of resets into Tyria. Is that, yes, Zaitan's magic has now gone back into the planet, but this isn't regular Zaitan magic, as regular as you can call that, but this is magic we corrupted and poisoned, and that is now flowing through Tyria. So what does that mean for the story? Well, the other Elder Dragons are going to presumably sense a rise in ambient magic levels. They're going to be spurred into activity somehow, but what happens when they feast on this? Are they also somehow weakened? And perhaps this then somehow ties into Scarlet's motives, and had she known this, maybe, yes, she was causing Morgemoth to rise, to stir a little quicker, but perhaps she did that knowing that this would also weaken Morgemoth and give us an opportunity to defeat it. And by the end, when this is all said and done, we'll be able to say, yes, Scarlet was a good guy in the end. Maybe that's the angle they're going for with her. I'll talk more about Scarlet in a second. More on this idea of the orbs, okay? So that's a big thing. That really is what I think this cutscene is. It's a double bluff. I think it's very cleverly done. And I sort of regret that I didn't talk about that enough before. But further, there's some more stuff about orbs, okay? Why are these things all being represented as orbs? Again, a little thing, just food for thought mostly. That's what many of these things are going to be here. But in the personal story, do not forget that we already know that there are orbs out there that seem to somehow represent powerful magical abilities, perhaps related to the Elder Dragons. The most significant orb we saw in the personal story was, I believe, just referred to as the blue orb, okay? It was literally a blue orb that was recovered by the crate at the bottoms of the oceans. Even the Lagos, Sire, one of the Lagos who becomes a prominent character in the personal story, doesn't exactly know where they got it from, but wherever this orb goes, Zaitan's corruption can't touch. And so the crate, learning this, had their priestesses have it in constant transit between two of their powerful strongholds, two of their powerful locations. One of them is in southeast Timberline Falls, and the other one is in just general eastern Mount Maelstrom. And they used to carry it between these two places. We came along, took the orb from them, condemning their areas to corruption. You specifically see that in the personal story. You take the orb, you return there later to recover a friend of yours, and the entire place has fallen to Zaitan's corruption. You take the orb and you use that to defend Fort Trinity, a base right on the outskirts of Or, where Zaitan's corruption had spread far and far beyond. That place stood protected from all of it because of the blue orb and the power of it. So the question is, where is this orb from? And the personal story seriously seems to hint that this is some kind of Elder Dragon power too. Don't forget this fact, which this story seems to be going into, okay? Which is that Elder Dragons, corruption at least, can't seem to corrupt other Elder Dragons. And so this is a big theme of what's happening with the Sylvari right now, yeah? Because they were previously immune, but now it looks like they might be getting corrupted by Morgemoth and so forth. But we also had these orbs. Sire even says in the personal story something to the effects of using the orb may have its own consequences. It may not necessarily be a good thing, but at least it protects us from Zaitan. So, you know, there's even some suggestions there that the deep sea dragon's corruption, if this is now filling the area with her corruption, his corruption, instead of Zaitan's, her corruption isn't all that bad, maybe? Maybe she's on side or something, a bit beyond, perhaps that's a bit beyond the scope. What I'm trying to say is I find it curious, in the world we have seen orbs that seem to be related to Elder Dragons, and now in the Eternal Alchemy they're being represented as orbs once again. I wonder, therefore, where was Zaitan's orb, if he had one? What's the weird chromatic orb we see in the Cursed Shore that is turning everything, I believe, they say, to gold? A place called the Weldwood, once related to Melandru. I had a pretty brief conversation with a friend who was pointing out some parallels to the visual imagery we see on the Eternal Alchemy with some real-world stuff. Now, I tend to not find this means very much, but it's interesting to see the developer's inspiration, perhaps. But, you know, there's some serious links here between what we're seeing in the Eternal Alchemy and stuff like Norse mythology and the World Tree, okay, like the Pale Tree being the World Tree. And there's some interesting things you can maybe derive from the story. Like, he was mentioning specifically the idea that in Norse mythology, there is a guardian serpent that protects the world and encircles the world, and maybe that's somehow going to come up in the Guild Wars 2 story too. Like, if there's a dragon for each orb, and Tyria is also an orb in the middle, who is Tyria's dragon, and many people were speculating that could be the Pale Tree. This, I can't speculate that much further on, really. I love the idea that there's a seventh element, basically. And there are some weird things you can look at. I did have this crazy, like, idea, right? If there's a dragon for each of the orbs, and maybe there's a god for each of the orbs, and now we're saying there's a dragon for Tyria, is there a god for Tyria? Then it can lead you into some really weird places. Well, one of my earliest random thoughts, just because I like Lissa so much, was that really, Lissa isn't one god, it's two deities that we refer to as one, and obviously she's a deliberate paradox, but maybe since if you consider them as separate, we actually do have 7 gods and 7 orbs, maybe you can jammy them all together. Something I do find very curious, easy to look over, and easy to think maybe they just threw in there for a bit of flavor. But think back to the Thormanova reactor fractal. What happened when they tapped into the ley lines? What came to defend Tyria when that magic was leaking out? Maybe this is their god. Well, something did come, remember? The anomaly. So what if the anomaly is a little bit more important than we currently give it credit for? What is the anomaly? Maybe it is just a nothing. Maybe it's just an excuse for a boss at the end of a fractal. But I found that kind of curious. There's also other weird things like, what if the Protectors of Tyria actually has nothing to do with the Pale Tree? What did we see when we were first introduced to the Elder Dragons? Who was it that was fighting them? Not necessarily them, but the minions of one of them. The dwarves. And the dwarves underwent this rite that turned them into stone and this great hive mind, very much like perhaps what we see the Elder Dragons are like. What if the dwarves are Tyria's actual natural defenses and somehow they tie into things a little bit later on down the line? Who knows? I was looking into a bit of underworld lore recently when I got to that personal story step where you get all that fantastic stuff about Grenth and you actually get to speak to one of Grenth's Reapers right at the end of the personal story. Probably my favourite quest, which is just fantastic. But I sort of realised something. Wait, hold on, we got 7 orbs here. Where else do 7 appear? Turns out many places, specifically the first one I noticed was in the underworld, one of these other realms. There were 7 regions to the underworld and there were 7 Reapers, one for each Reaper. And it's like, okay, maybe you can tie them together. You can't really. I did, just for fun, try it. So you've got the Chaos Plains. Well, that's kind of purpley, so, you know, Kraukatoric, that's pretty easy. You've got the Bone Pits. Come on, Zaitan, very easy. The Ice Wastes. Jormag, this is still pretty easy. And then it wears down a bit. Then we've got the Spawning Pools. Perhaps these could be any of the Elder Dragons, but the fact that Primordus builds minions out of pools of lava, maybe you can link it together, and it just gets a bit ridiculous from there. There was the Labyrinth, there was the Forgotten Vale, and then there were the Twin Serpent Mountains. Just kind of interesting. I'm sure it's just that, like Bungie, they love the number 7. But some probably more deliberate connections here. The Crucible of Eternity, which is a new version of the Thormanova reactor. It should come as no surprise to you guys that this has a big central area where we enter the dungeon, and around it are 6 different hub locations, 1 for each dragon, and there you go, it ends up looking a lot like what we saw in the Eternal Alchemy. The ordering is slightly different from the Eternal Alchemy, so it's not a 1-for-1 matchup, and I think that could be important owing to the balance of the picture, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then therefore also the Thormanova Reactor 2 also has this similar structure. I don't think we can get too much out of the story from it, but it is interesting, the idea that, you know, these places could draw power from the different Elder Dragons in each quarter, and then they like mix them all together in the middle, as we saw with like Subject Alpha and whatever the big monster it was that we fought in the story mode of that dungeon itself. So yeah, let's talk about the balance of the image. This is a curious idea I never had before, but it comes into this curious question of why is it Morgemoth that is the one who's now become so active? Zaitan's fallen into the planet, right? And some people think from the trailer of the next patch that there could be a lot of stuff with Jormag. Jormag comes into the story. I don't know whether I buy that completely, but it's certainly Morgemoth has now gone crazy, right? Since Zaitan died. Why did that happen? Well, if we have a look at the image here, you'll notice that who was opposite Morgemoth? Well, it was Zaitan. You had the undead Elder Dragon of Death, and I guess keeping life in check, opposite an Elder Dragon of presumably like life and overgrowth. And so the idea would be these two positioned opposite one another, they keep each other in check. Not only do they strip the magic back out of Tyria to keep its levels low, perhaps avoid disaster. What happens if we do kill the Elder Dragons and the magic just goes all over the place? Well, they keep it in check, but then also they're keeping each other in check, right? Not too much of one type of magic is there. What if they're actually all consuming their own kinds of magic? Though we have heard in the past that they'll compete over territory and stuff. So now that Zaitan's gone, this means that Morgemoth on the left can come and pick up all the slack and consume all of that magic that Zaitan seeped into the world. And so the same thing can be said for the others. Look at what the other pairings are. You've got Primordus on the bottom, fire, versus Jormag of ice. Fire against ice, and up at the top you've got water with the deep sea dragon against like the air and lightning of Kraukatoric. Kind of fits, I think, at least in some ways. Interesting idea. It would explain why Morgemoth has come forward. And yeah, what if now he has been poisoned? I think a big question that keeps coming up in discussions about the current plot is what was Scarlet's actual purpose here, right? I think they're going to go either two ways with Scarlet. They're going to make her posthumously into some big hero. The idea behind this plot would be Scarlet knew that Zhaitan had all of this like corrupted magic owing to the way we'd killed him. Scarlet also knew that by knocking Zhaitan out of the picture, Morgemoth would want to consume a lot of that magic. And Scarlet knew that if Morgemoth did this, it would weaken Morgemoth, perhaps strengthen him in some ways, like you were seeing with the vines and stuff, but it would also open up, you know, his Achilles heel or whatever. So what she did was she assessed the situation and saw that Morgemoth was still too inactive. I believe he was awake. Don't forget he was corrupting her. He was in her head. I'll get to that in a second. But what she did was she saw this, and she thought to herself, okay, I'll give Morgemoth a huge boost of energy by tapping into this ley line in Lion's Arch, the mechanics of which, how do we even know that works? But by doing this, yes, she's woken him up more, but she knows secretly that this is going to kill him, right? They've either done that, alright? Morgemoth was clearly trying to play her himself. Morgemoth was constantly in her head, constantly trying to get her to help him. And maybe she made Morgemoth think that he had power over her, but really she did it as a big middle finger. And how we eventually defeat Morgemoth, it will be this reveal, and then it will be like, yay, Scarlet was a hero, this is awesome, even though she killed so many of us and, you know, did whatever. It also explains, this story explains more of why we had the Tower of Nightmares arc, why she was looking so much into poison and toxins. I've said it before on the channel, I really think that this could be more than just, oh, I needed a miasma to attack Lion's Arch. What if this poison research was done to specifically poison the ley lines, exacerbate the damage we did to Zhaitan, and keep those toxins flowing or whatever? She taps into the ley line, poisons it even further, to Morgemoth's detriment. Either they'll do that, or, and this I think will be the better story, just because the other one's predictable, or they'll literally set up the idea that she could be doing this, that she could have been a hero, and then we'll find out, actually no, she wasn't a hero at all. She thought she was doing all this stuff. She thought she was strong enough to resist Morgemoth. She thought she was going to blaze her own trail, and she was going to be different from the Pale Tree. She was going to be different from the Nightmare Court. She was special. She was this great engineer. She had all of this boastfulness about herself, and she was going to be the one to save Tyria, or, you know, knock out the system or whatever. She thought that for herself, but ultimately she failed, and she didn't end up doing any of it. She just fed Morgemoth just as she wanted. She had this Elder Dragon in her head. You read those journals from Scarlet, and you can really see she's starting to go crazy. She's starting to get cracked, okay? And I think the best laid plans, they went to waste. And it turns out, you know, she failed. So then, it's not that she's a hero, it's that she tried. And she was a tragic hero. And that, I think, makes her whole story arc, like, way cooler, to me, at least. And it means when we finally do fight Morgemoth, it's not like, oh, hey, yeah, we can kill him because of Scarlet. It's like we have to come up with our own plan. There's that extra risk there, that extra excitement in question. One thing I should have mentioned earlier in the video, I just got a couple of notes on a notepad here. The idea of the Hall of the Heroes. So yeah, we talked about how there's all these different realms, right? One realm for each god. One thing I totally neglected to mention, now we've got like a 7th realm, Tyria, right? Or whatever. One thing I totally neglected to mention is the Hall of the Heroes. Who governs that? Is there a dragon for the Hall of the Heroes? You guys might not even know what this is. But supposedly, at the center of the mists, okay, is a place called the Rift, right? In the Rift, this is like a tear. They describe this. This is very old lore, right? They describe it as a tear in the fabric of the cosmos, where time moves neither forward nor back. The perfect point of balance between all forces of the universe, okay? This could even come into the story at some point. How cool would this be, right? But you've got the Rift in the middle. Who created the Rift? Why is there this tear in the cosmos? But in the center of the Rift, even, is a place called the Hall of Heroes. This is like another realm, if you will. It's an imposing walled fortress known across the multiverse as the Hall of Heroes. The Norn actually have their own name for it. This structure is the pinnacle of the afterlife. When a hero dies, his spirit goes to either one of two places. Either it is buried with the deceased body, forever trapped inside the rotting flesh and rancid bones of the corpse, or it is released into the Rift. This latter honor only goes to those few whose deeds in life were legendary enough to be known across multiple worlds, and fewer still even earn a place among the souls ensconced inside the hall itself. And the hall was this beautiful golden place. There'll be footage of it in the background. Really cool. It was kind of like the ultimate PvP place in Guild Wars 1 also, you know, aside from GVGs. Really cool, and I never even thought how that could tie into all of this stuff. Maybe you guys have got some interesting theories yourselves. I find myself greatly tempted to talk again about how you would pair Elder Dragons with gods. I just want to make myself clear here, okay? I think no matter what way you do this, you have to shoehorn something. I've had countless people say to me, no, there is a perfect way it works, and then they give me the perfect way, and then you say, no, it's not perfect because this person would fit better over here because of their element or because of their nature or whatever. There is no perfect way, guys. There isn't. However, I do keep constantly coming back to this discussion just because ArenaNet seem to want to make it happen themselves. Even way back in that Path to Revelations quest in Guild Wars 1, they seem to be going down this angle, and so I keep sort of prodding it every now and then. Here was an interesting pairing I came up with a friend. Balthazar goes to Primordus, fire, war, you know, easy peasy. Melandru and Morgemoth, also very easy, life, nature. Then, Grenth and Jormag, right? Immediately, it's like, okay, well, Grenth fits better with Zaitan, because Grenth is death. But Grenth and Jormag, because they both represent ice, okay? Some people also come, when this discussion comes up, they're like, well, how can water and ice be different elements? That's ridiculous. Because that's the way it is in this world, right? This isn't any other fantasy game you've played. They can totally be different elements as long as it works within this franchise. Anyway, so you've got ice and ice for me, Grenth and Jormag. I think that is a clearer pairing than trying to go death and death with Zaitan and Grenth. However, in the personal story, and I quote, you can speak to a priestess of Grenth in the Cathedral of Grenth in Or, and you can ask them, hey, Mr. Priestess of Grenth, how is it that this temple is resisting Zaitan's corruption? And the priestess responds by saying, I do not believe it resists it entirely, but Grenth's power is akin to Zaitan's. Therefore, it may be he has more spiritual power to fight against the dragon. So there is obviously some connection between these two, and you can connect them thusly. But moving on, here's where you could do some more interesting pairings. Cormyr with Kralkatorrik. Previously, I talked about the idea of Cormyr with Zaitan. So why the Cormyr-Kralkatorrik connection? Because they both begin with K. No. So the idea would be, right, that, let's look at Abaddon, okay? Abaddon was the god of secrets, right? Cormyr became the god of truth, but why was he the god of secrets? Well, let's think about what was the biggest secret the gods were keeping from the people of Tyria. What were they hiding in the vaults beneath Ara? They were hiding the secret of the Elder Dragons. This perhaps suggests that Abaddon knew more about the Elder Dragons, or was tasked with concealing that information more than the other gods, right? The god of secrets. I find it interesting that Abaddon also lived in the Crystal Sea. Now, the Crystal Sea became the Crystal Desert when he died, suggesting that maybe it was originally a desert, the gods came, they like terraformed the planet or whatever, he made that place into an ocean. When he lost his power and was banished to the realm of torment, it became a desert again. This would explain why it was called the Crystal Sea. How does something get the name the Crystal Sea, unless it was already a desert before, and people recognized it was a desert made out of tiny crystals? Where did these crystals come from? Kralkatorrik. So this whole idea suggests that Kralkatorrik has always had influence there. Yes, I know Kralkatorrik never woke up in the Crystal Desert, but he did go there straight away, and Glint decided to stick about in the Crystal Desert herself. And so if Abaddon's primary region was also the primary region of Kralkatorrik, maybe that suggests some connection. Perhaps the more compelling idea here, though, is look at the branded. What are they? They're like purple creatures infused with Kralkatorrik's magic, right? When Abaddon went to war with the other gods, what did he do? He took his Marganites, a seafaring group of people who lived on the Crystal Sea, and he infused them with magic. Where did he get that magic, right? The other gods had sealed it away. They'd taken it away in the Bloodstones. Where did Abaddon get the magic to give them so that he could go to war? Maybe he got it from Kralkatorrik, because if you think about the way the Marganites look, don't they look an awful lot like branded to you guys? So maybe there's a connection there. Maybe this is why those two would be paired. And if you pair all of them thusly, as I've explained, that leaves only Dwayna and Zaitan. Oh, and look, that fits kind of well. Yeah, Dwayna's like the goddess of life, and Grenth kind of fits, but, you know, a lot of people say, hey, maybe it's this life undeath thing. Zaitan really wasn't the Elder Dragon of death, he was the Elder Dragon of life, because he was bringing things back to life. Well, he wasn't really, was he? I don't agree with that at all. I still think this pairing is shoddy. For example, for people who think that the Risen were living things, they totally weren't. If you don't believe me, you can see it for yourself. Go to Mount Maelstrom, that little swamp in the southwest, and there is a spirit there in a little cave, and you can speak to the spirit, and he says, oh, hi, yeah, I'm a spirit. I'm dead, I'm a ghost, yeah. Well, my body is sort of mindlessly shambling around in awe, and I feel really bad about this. That's not a living thing. Zaitan doesn't bring life to things, so to pair him with Dwayna, I don't know. I really don't. I think Grenth is possibly a better pairing. And maybe you can do that. Maybe you can, under this system, you can swap Grenth and Dwayna. And now you have Dwayne and Jormag paired together, but where's the relevance there, even remotely? There's just not. So, anyway, yeah, I just wanted to talk about that a bit. Maybe it's inspired you guys a little. I'm still waiting for the perfect theory, but I promise you, until we get more information, I don't think it exists. Speaking of this idea of ghosts, obviously next patch it looks like something's going to be going on with the faux fire. People have been speculating, hey, what happens to X ghost or Y ghost? You know, like this, that specific necromantic ghost that you can meet. What is it? Iron Marches, and she's got the haunted house. I will just remind you guys that ghosts can exist outside of the faux fire. Gw2, there was no faux fire at all. There were plenty of ghosts around. There was a bit of an undead problem. Interestingly, the only continent where there wasn't an undead problem was Cantha. And in Cantha, these people had set up these envoys, okay? Shepherds of the dead. In Cantha, anytime anyone died, there was an envoy who would take their spirit to the afterlife. And the only time that they had an undead problem in Cantha is when one of those envoys, Shiro Tagachi, went a little bit rogue. And then you had stuff like the Shiroken and the Afflicted. And that was the main plot of that entire continent. Everywhere else, Nightfall, Tyria, these places have had undead problems. They've had ghosts wandering around them. And they're still there even in Gw2. Even if the faux fire goes away, that doesn't mean that the ghosts currently wandering around at Saul D'Alessio's fake tomb in Harathi Hinterlands are going to go away. They'll still be there. It doesn't mean that those pirate ghosts in Bloodtide Coast will go away too. And so there's every bit of possibility some ghosts in Ascalon are just regular ghosts. They're not like faux fire ghosts, they're just regular ghosts. And so don't think that that's going to be the complete elimination of what it means to be an undead in this game outside of Zaitan. Thinking about Zaitan's connection with stuff like the Envoys too, you know, really two distant pieces of lore, but somehow linked somehow maybe in a weird way, is kind of an exciting thing to me, but I wouldn't know where to begin. Lastly, just a few more topics. I can't believe I've been recording 30 minutes, so I should really stop. The Master of Peace's backpack. I really don't know what could be in there. Anyone saying that it's a dragon's egg is a bit of an idiot, in my opinion, because Glint's baby had already hatched in the first game. And do you think it wouldn't have grown a little bit in 250 years? Unless we're saying that Glint's baby has now had a baby. It's more likely that it's something else he's holding. Maybe, to bring it into something I was saying earlier in the cutscene, it's an orb. Maybe he's seen, right, that Morgemoth's influence has grown, and he's got an orb. Maybe that's what he's doing. Maybe not the blue orb that he stole from Fort Trinity. I'm sure that thing's still there. But maybe a different one. Maybe this is Zaitan's orb, because those two are paired, and using Zaitan's orb, he hopes to defeat Morgemoth straight away. I think that would be really cool if that ended up in his backpack. Aside from that, I don't have any cooler ideas, in my opinion. There's this idea that Casimir could tell who that Zephyrite was lying. Now, I knew this would be significant in some way, but I didn't think it was that worthy of speculation. However, if you've been watching the devs' live streams, Points of Interest, one of the primary writers on Living World, she talked a lot about, oh, hey, this is really important, you should focus on this. So, I guess this is going to come up somewhere. I've read a little bit of speculation on the topic that I think somewhat warranted, and this is the idea that Casimir has a gift, okay? And it was around the time of Nightmares she realized this gift, or it began to grow. That doesn't mean she acquired it at the Tower of Nightmares. It was just that this was like a specific thing she started to get more control of, or it grew in power around that story arc. And this seems to be the idea that she can tell who a liar is. I immediately attributed this to, oh, hey, it's because she's a mesmer. Don't forget when we first met Casimir as well, she was talking about like a guild of mesmers that she's a part of, these extraordinary mesmers, and those were the people who even sent her to the Tower of Nightmares. They seem like just complete filler. Oh, hey, here's an excuse why Casimir's there right now. Be really cool if the story went back into them, and then she sort of went to them for counsel about her gift at some point. But what actually caused her to have this gift, I couldn't begin to speculate. I read one person say, oh, it could be because she's ascended, and the ascended can tell who liars are. I've never read that lore anywhere. If maybe there's a source on that, I'll be more intrigued. But I did look up a lot of the ascended stuff, and I can't see a source for that. I don't think the ascended can tell who liars are. They can just see things that others can't. They can see like celestial entities. They can see the Massat when they try and slip out of phase with Tyria, and so forth. Anyway, so that's one interesting plot. And finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Gw2. This was originally going to be in the first video, but it just didn't have a place. And since nothing in this video has a place anywhere, it was particularly cohesive. The Gw2, okay, each previous race to fight the Elder Dragons like had a special thing. Some of them learned how to cure corruption. Some of them learned how to store magic away, and so forth. What did the Gw2 have? Well, they were stargazers. And you learn in Ra, and I find this very interesting, that the stars in the heavens reflect the birth of Elder Dragons, or the awakening of Elder Dragons at the very least. Like when Zaitan arose for them, presumably they saw a star appear in the sky. Really cool. And at the end of a Ra Explorable, where you learn this stuff, after Zaitan is dead, supposedly if he even is dead, right, you can look in one of their mystic telescopes and it shows you an image of the heavens and it shows kind of like this purpley vortex thing. There'll be footage of this in the background. What does any of that mean? I don't know. I just thought it was cool and I wanted to talk to you guys about it. Maybe someone's got some ideas. I don't think we should ignore the Jotun though, because right now they're like languishing behind all the other races and cool stuff that they did. I want to see more story about the night skies, about the North Star interior, the one star that never moves. All the others do and they interchange and whatever, but there's one star that is always fixed above them. Maybe this star is the anomaly, which is the god of Tyria, which also has its own orb, which is in the Master of Peace's backpack. There you go, there's the grand theory. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I guess I will see you tomorrow for Patch Day. Have a good one.